Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to address a topic that could both cover the political slash social situation in the United States, along with a more personal matter, I suppose. Just a discussion I had with someone who did not seem to like my viewpoint, let's say. So you're in for a spicy, controversial podcast. Who knows how many followers I'll lose with this one? Probably not many because I only have like 100. So whatever. I'm just going to go into it. Um, and it's all about trying to find the truth. And what I mean by that is actually acknowledging the points that someone is making to you in a discussion. Because the goal of a discussion, or honestly an argument, in my humble opinion, should be to find the truth of the matter, okay? To for both parties to become closer, because I'm going to go into the assumption that none of us actually know the truth in the world, and we're all just kind of desperately trying to improve ourselves and improve society and argue what we see as being closest to the truth, but we never fully know. um and that's a point of discussion and debate, I think, to improve ourselves, our own way of thinking, and to say, oh shit, this person's actually making sense. I didn't think about it that way. Or to be like, oh, well, you know, I don't agree with what they're saying. I don't really think they're making that much sense. But now I'm going to know, oh, I need to address this in my argument or that in my argument. um maybe you can help someone else closer reach the truth, and then that'll just help the community, society as a whole, etc., etc. But the issue is no one is actually willing to follow this sort of ideological doctrine, I guess, because everyone is too hyper focused on just being right. No one gives a shit about, oh, we're trying to find the truth, we're trying to improve society. No one gives a shit about that. All they care about is, oh my god, my way of thought is being questioned. I need to defend it and die trying. I will break up friendships. I will hate someone for an unreasonably long amount of time, perhaps forever. Um, and the hatred itself is inherently unreasonable. Um, but yeah, it's one thing if someone's acting very rude, very disrespectful, very hateful, and you're having a discussion. But there are people who get so angry and heated and hateful towards other people just based on the fact that they have a differing belief than they do. But moving on. Um, yeah. So the problem with this mentality of, oh, I must be right, I need to win the debate, is that it kind of undermines the point of having a discussion in general, especially one-on-one. Who are you trying to prove yourself to in a one-on-one discussion to the point where you just need to be right? Are you trying to dominate the other person? If so, why? Um that doesn't help anyone really, and unless they're probably has some sort of insecurity issue, I doubt they're just going to roll over and fucking die in a debate. They're probably going to defend themselves to I don't know, their last breath. I guess is a little dramatic, but I hope you got my point. Um, so there's no point in a one-on-one conversation to try and be like, oh, I'm right. I need to prove I'm just right to this person. What you need to find is the truth. Okay. What about a group conversation? Why do people care so much about, what is it, clout, or just trying to show that you're this, oh, dominant being, where it's like, oh, you beat everyone in a debate, congratulations, you've done literally nothing productive to society except prove that you're a better debater than that person. That doesn't even mean you were right in the debate. Look at Ben Shapiro, for instance. Ben Shapiro, fantastic debater, Many times from what I've seen with him, that doesn't mean he's right. You have people kind of stumbling over their own words when talking to Ben Shapiro because, not because he's inherently right. Now, does he have some good opinions? Yeah, I'm not gonna. I don't hate Ben Shapiro. I don't. I don't think he's a dumb person. I think he's intelligent. As I said, great debater and stuff. But that doesn't mean he's infallible. Ben Shapiro's a normal human being, just like the rest of us, and that goes for any person who you see as very intelligent in like debating and stuff like that. I've heard all sorts of figures. I mean, we hear that Trump is a genius. We hear Ben Shapiro. I mean, with Trump, it's a little bit more like, well, some people think he's a genius. Some people think he's the stupidest man on earth. But I'm not getting into that. Um, some people think Elizabeth Warren is a genius, etc., etc. Okay, no matter who it is, there is no for me personally, Andrew Yang, my friends. Um, but no matter who it is, they're human. They're gonna make mistakes. You cannot go off everything they say, even if they win a one-on-one or one-on-three, whatever debate. You can't take everything they say as absolute truth. What you need to do is you need to look at what they're saying, and honestly, you need to play devil's advocate. That's what I find works the best, okay? You need to look at the other side and be like, okay, let's research a little bit more into this. What is the other side actually trying to say? And oftentimes with these skilled debaters, the other side isn't going to have a chance to really say what they want to say, and it's only going to leave everyone frustrated. The quote unquote winner is going to feel like, oh, why are these dummies even trying to take me on? I just school them every time. And then the quote unquote losers are just going to be like, they're going to feel unsatisfied because even though they got trounced in the debate, they know subconsciously that their opinions had more merit to that than how they ended up representing them. And this is why you need to find the truth. Don't focus on winning or losing. You need to try and find the truth of every matter because that's what's going to improve society. That's what's actually going to make the world a better place. None of this BS about trying to just feel superior about yourself. It doesn't fucking matter, okay? Get a boyfriend, get a girlfriend, get, whatever type of romantic interest that is floats your boat, whatever, and you two, you three, you four can praise each other and feed your own egos that way, okay? In a healthy, committed relationship, don't bring that on everyone else around you, okay? Where you suddenly, because we're not, I was gonna say, let's say, sexually pleasuring you. um, just because we're not bending over backwards to please you, right? Doesn't mean you should suddenly just force your own ego and sense of superiority on us, okay? Go fucking find someone who will consensually uh satisfy you in such you and your emotional needs. So, moving along, right? Where does this now leave us? What this does is lead us to the sort of next segment, which is you can't just dismiss someone based on their own experiences. You need to actually consider what they're saying. And this is going to be hard. Um, because we've all witnessed this where someone just has a completely different experience than you do. And you're like, oh my fucking god, this person has no idea what they're talking about. And, you've probably been in a situation where someone else has thought the exact same thing about you. If only we as a society instead say, okay, now this person doesn't seem to be acknowledging my perspective. And that's because, well, they haven't experienced it. So how can I better, um, you know, show an example of my experience and actually convey the emotion, the sensation of my experiences to this person so that they can better understand me. Now, if we all uh, gave more care towards the idea of pursuing the truth, then people would be totally open. They would always want to know, like, oh, for example, me personally, I'm a white male from a state in the United States, let's say. I would love to hear the experience of someone who's grown up in a completely different area, be that in the United States or a completely different country, someone who maybe different religious values than I do, different race, different sex, different cultural background, etc., etc. I would love to hear all of that stuff, right? I love to get their perspective because their perspective enriches my own perspective. We grow on top of each other, okay? Even if this person has some opinion on, like, they start talking about my background and it's like they really don't have that much of an opinion that is based in, let's say, the same accuracy that I would have because I actually grew up in that background. Um, but even if they were talking about a specific subject that was more related to me and not them, well, I think it's still important to hear people out. Okay. Now, and this does go under the assumption that the person is actually willing to have a discussion. We are always going to get heated, but it's like, if someone is willing to actually have a discussion, I think they should be afforded the benefit of the doubt, and I think they should not be immediately dismissed. um and honestly, if you are in the position where it's like, okay, this person clearly does not respect me, does not respect having the discussion, and just doesn't doesn't actually want to have a reasonable conversation, then it's like you shouldn't be talking to that person anyway. You shouldn't be having a discussion with that person anyway. You shouldn't even take the time to dismiss their point of view, because you should just dismiss the conversation in general and be like, well, I don't even want to talk to you. Because unless someone is actually willing to have a proper discussion, there's no point in talking to them. They're just wasting your time. You're just getting irritated for no reason. But let's go back to the main point, okay? If you're in an actual discussion with someone, I'm going to use this as a more um, realistic example. And I know some people aren't going to like it because I'm not, a minority in the United States, okay? I don't know what people have like gone through. Personally, like obviously I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I've listened to a lot of people, but I haven't personally experienced these things. But a big thing is people will say, "Oh, well, you haven't experienced X, racial injustice or whatnot." And though I don't personally hear a lot of this because I generally feel like I have viewpoints that are more in line with some of the mainstream racial injustice policies in terms of like combating racial injustice and stuff like that. Um, but, I could totally see how someone who grew up in, let's say, a white conservative neighborhood and kind of like lived there their whole life, let's say they have a conversation with a black person who grew up in like a more liberal city or something like that, and they're having a discussion about racial injustice, can totally see how it would be so tempting for someone to just be like, listen, bro, you haven't lived what I lived. How could you even have an opinion on all of these things when you have no idea what you're talking about? And we're always, all of us are going to have that idea, but it's just such an unproductive mentality to have because it benefits absolutely no one. You're only angering yourself by thinking, oh god, this person's so stupid, they're having an opinion on something that they haven't even lived through, right? um and at the same time, you're only going to make that other person defensive because they're going to be like, oh well, this person doesn't care about my opinion, etc., etc. What needs to be done is you do need to acknowledge the feeling of and establish a sort of fundamental understanding that either, depending on whether it's them or you, there needs to be an understanding of the party that has actually lived the experiences of the subject you're talking about, okay? If we're talking about racial injustice in the United States of America, and there is a black person from like the city or something, same scenario as I used before, and then like a white rural conservative, right? The black person has lived this racial injustice that is most likely being talked about in the conversation, and there should be an established understanding of that. That doesn't mean you say, and I know some people are going to be like, well, why should I even bother? I'll get to that, and also refer back to my previous um, points in this podcast rant, whatever. But anyway, so that doesn't mean that you just go, you just be like, oh well, how can you have an opinion? You haven't lived it. It's more of being relaxed and being understanding of like, you need to take into consideration the fact that we live different experiences, and I'm speaking on a subject where I have actually gone through these things. Um, and I understand everyone's going to be heated in an argument, okay? It doesn't have to be exactly that perfect, but I just hope that people do take more consideration towards how they word things and how they express themselves in a discussion or a debate, and that they try to actually honestly kind of help the other person. Try and help the other person understand them and reach the truth. Because as I said before, if your goal is not to reach the truth, then what's even the point? It's only going to be unproductive. And this might sound like preaching from a person who, oh, you haven't faced depression, you haven't gone through this or that, right? But every single person has suffered through something in their life, and it's gonna be a situation that another person just doesn't understand, whether that means you're poor, whether you've gone through abuse or something like that, whether you've gone through some sort of racial injustice, or some sort of like sexist scenario, stuff like that, right? We've all gone through something, okay? And this applies to every single person. If you're in a conversation with someone where the other person, granted, is trying to understand you fundamentally, but they're struggling with it, and they're failing to acknowledge some obvious facts, let's say, about the fact that you've experienced a certain thing, right? If you're in a conversation though, and there is goodwill, good intention, um, then you do need to help the person, okay? You can't just dismiss them. You can't just be like, oh well, f you. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, because unproductive. In fact, it is counterproductive. And this is going to go into a different sort of segment too. How to sabotage your own movement. There are so many times when someone has such a perfect argument, but it is their attitude and the way they conduct themselves that sabotages their their own, case, right? I'll give you for instance, and as I said, this is a big transition, but let's take the Black Lives Matter protests in the beginning versus kind of what we're seeing it transitioning to in the beginning. All about death of George Floyd, all about racial injustices in the United States, stuff like that. I think honestly, really good cases, really good like um, points that were made by the majority of like protesters and protest movements. I'm super glad. I made a previous video about this. I'm super glad that there was justice for George Floyd in the end. Granted, I'm not closely following that as much, um, but from what I understand, at least, the cops were arrested, are being on trial, stuff like that, right? So glad that happened, and I'm glad that this has brought up a national conversation about race in the United States to the point where I think it's the most productive conversation that we've had so far from my lifetime at least, because this has happened in the past where everyone starts protesting over, an unjustifiable killing of someone, and it has not resulted in the same level of talking and open discussion. And I think a lot of people are being more empathetic this time around, which is always great. But the issue now is becoming the fact that it's so easily, like, there are clear malicious forces that want to undermine the protests, and all the, I'm not going to say all protests are rioters or some sort of nonsense like that, because that's obviously not true, right? But the fact that the protests are gradually being shaped narratively into more of, oh well, now it's about taking down statues, taking down memorials, taking down, this and that. I'm actually way more um empathetic towards the idea of like Confederate stuff, taking that down. But, taking down a statue of Thomas Jefferson, taking down things about like past presidents and stuff like that, it's it's not that the idea is inherently terrible, I would say. It's just that you had something so good to focus on, right? About racial injustice in the United States, and it's already a problem that is not solved. We're so far away from it being solved. But now it's like the time for the protests, it's just being transformed and manipulated into something that it really shouldn't be. And I understand this is a white guy on YouTube ranting about this. Who gives a fuck about what I say? You don't have to. No one has to care about what I say, okay? I'm just trying to find the truth. And I honestly think that the truth is going to be, the longer this is allowed to kind of devolve, the more it's going to polarize people and distract people from what should actually be focused on. I'll give you, for instance, instead of acknowledging the true, like 100% unifying idea that racial injustice does need to be combated in the United States. I honestly think, I'm sorry if, I understand I don't have a 100% accurate idea of this, but I honestly think there are a lot of people who are sympathetic, empathetic towards the plights of minority groups in the United States and want to see racial injustice solved and addressed and stuff like that. I think a lot of people, I think I mentioned this in my last video, saw what happened to George Floyd and said that's fucked up. But humans are not these perfect creatures, okay? When we drift farther away from what happened to George Floyd, when we drift farther away from combating all these, systemic racism, police brutality, stuff like that, and we just go into, oh, we need to take down this Thomas Jefferson statue because Thomas Jefferson was a fucking dick with 17 or 1700s values, 18th century values. So we have to take a statue down. You're gonna. It's so. It's like, I'm sorry. I understand the statue might mean a lot to a lot of people, but it's a fucking statue. Okay? Can we please concern ourselves with the issues that are actually killing people in the United States? And this is what I'm talking about, from detracting from your own case, okay? Focus on having a discussion. I know it might be fucking painful that humans in this world are all irrational creatures and we're all fucking stupid, but I'm sorry, we're all just fucking stupid, okay? So we gotta come up with better strategies to try and pursue the truth and understand each other and focus on the issues that matter, instead of trying, getting divided every time we agree over some dumb bullshit, okay? And I'm sorry if you cared that much about a fucking statue, but, and you could take that down once we solve the actual issues, but please let us solve the actual issues first. people end up getting so emotionally involved and invested over such nonsense, in my opinion. And I'm sorry, this is going to piss a lot of people off. But in order to pursue the truth of a situation, okay, ditch the fucking emotions, the immediate emotional reaction, at least, okay? Obviously, emotional thinking, it does play some form in the argument, right? But it cannot be the entire basis, I honestly believe, of the entire argument, where it's like, oh, you have nothing except, um I don't like how you're making me feel, or some shit like that. I don't like what your argument is saying, and therefore I'm going to ignore you and just be angry this whole time. Okay? Like, listen, some people are dicks and shit, okay? You don't have to have the discussion. You don't have to have the debate. That's fine. You can cut off the conversation. You can end. But do you really think people are going to be convinced by the, oh, well, I don't like how that makes me feel argument? Of course, it does depend on what the hell you're talking about, okay? And there is, I think, a way to come across logically with feelings. Um, in a sense of, what is going to be the most productive to society, what is going to be the most inclusive to society, and that type of thing is, generally based on emotions and stuff like that. But it's not a matter of like, oh, you said something I didn't like, so I'm just going to be angry at you. It's not that type of thing. It's more about just a general emotional, productive matter in society. I'll give you, for instance, this is more of relating to like identity. Identity is a big thing where it's like, well, you're not going to have a totally, analytical approach to identity. A lot of times it's going to be, yeah, a more emotional subject. But I do think that you can be sort of logical with emotions and make a sort of argument, a sort of case on why your viewpoint will be better for everyone, instead of just pretty much having it where it's like, oh, it's better for myself. Sorry, honestly, that last tangent might have detracted from my overall statement, but hopefully, I'm having a little bit of an excuse because it's a podcast, right? And this is devolved. This has devolved into a rant, okay, where I've just lost all fucking sacred aspects of my original argument. But honestly, dude, I'm just tired. I'm just tired of people going on and doing their stupid shit all the time, okay? I was trying to have a conversation with someone about how people need to take personal responsibility and watch out for themselves and watch out for signs of like, suspicious signs in whether it's a relationship or in an interaction with another human being. More specifically, there was a Reddit post I saw, and it was about this person who just was clearly being manipulated by the other person, and it's like, you gotta fucking watch out for that shit. And this wasn't a victim blaming thing, right? I wasn't saying, oh, well, it's your fault for being manipulated, right? It's more of the fact that you're not entirely free of responsibility here. Yeah, the other person's a fucking dick, but you're not um you're not free yourself, in a sense of, you can't just be like, oh, well, I did absolutely nothing that needs to be improved upon. No, it's like your understanding of human nature and your watching out for other people and protecting yourself does need to be improved upon, or else you're going to be locked into an endless, fucking shit fest of people just manipulating you and taking advantage of you. Why would you want to subject yourself to that, you know? But I was talking to my friend, and then she's like, oh, well, you're just victim blaming, have you ever been in this situation yourself? And now you see what started this podcast. And I'm like, well, no, I haven't been in this specific situation. I've been in a situation similar to it, right, where I have some kind of perspective, but not this exact situation. And then she just used that as the base to dismiss my entire argument. Um, which, it's like, okay, I get it. We disagree. We're not going to talk to each other. That's cool, right? But where was the fucking productive the productive aspect to that, okay? I'm sorry. I'm clearly biased here, okay? It's my podcast. I'm clearly going to be biased towards my fucking opinions. But where the hell, how was that productive? How was it productive just going on towards each other and and you know, not even listening, not even going into the details, right? Just immediately like, oh, well, no, one person cannot have an opinion on this because they did not witness this exact situation. Are we supposed to like, so for example, I dealt with poverty when I was growing up. Anyone who's richer than me just can't understand my situation and therefore has no right to form an opinion on anything related to what I went through? No, it's fucking stupid, okay? And this is what I'm talking about. We've all gone through something where the other side, we've been talking to someone and they just haven't experienced the same thing. We can't live in a society where we just dismiss everyone because they haven't 100% experienced what we've gone through. This is why we need to find the truth. This is why we need to pursue helping people during a discussion and actually working together to find the truth. And people do not understand that. And you know what happens when they don't understand that? They detract from their own argument. It ostracizes everyone, everyone gets angry, and then you know what opinion wins? Not the one that's right, not the one that's with the best argument, but the one that is most sensationalized, the one with the most followers, and then everyone gets fucking angry because we get stuck with shit that no one really likes, but some sort of vocal minority has been able to push on everyone else. So, yeah, I'd say this is the end of the rant, okay? Not even a podcast, dude. I'm not even gonna try and disguise it as a podcast, okay? Hope you enjoyed. Hope this made you consider something. Please leave either angry, thoughtful, or good discussion comments in the comment section down below. Like and subscribe, etc., etc. And I'll see you on the next one.